Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, and a good night. I am Patrick. This is Storytelling Imperfectly, and welcome to the channel. And if you're new to the channel, I am Patrick. I hope you like what you see. Again, guys, the case I got for you today, like all my cases, it's really weird. And it always, these types of cases should not go unnoticed or unreported, but they seem to fall through the cracks all the time. But sit back, relax, it's story time. Let's jump into it and see if we can't figure out what happened to James Griffin. James Griffin, a 60-year-old man and a resident of Port Angeles in Washington State, was a all-around stable guy from what all of his friends and family say. James had a passion for hiking and he loved to hike, but something that put a damper on that was James, being a laborer, had injured his foot and was on disability. Now, James was from Michigan originally, but had moved out to Washington State, and he absolutely adored the area. The thing about Port Angeles and that whole region of Washington State is that it's right there at Olympic National Park. Now, if you know anything about Olympic National Park, or if you don't, let me inform you. It is a beautiful, beautiful place, guys. It is absolutely gorgeous and has some of the best, well-kept and maintained hiking trails that you could possibly imagine. In fact, most of them are paved even to a certain extent, and some of them all the way up to wherever locale or destination you're trying to get to. Now, James loved going to one place in particular in Olympic National Park, and that was its hot springs. And the reason he liked to do this was because he had an injured foot. James liked to go up to the hot springs and he liked to soak. And if nothing else, soak his feet. Now, at this particular time, it was December 22nd of 2014. So it was a bit chilly outside. So James's plan was to just hike up to the hot springs, maybe soak his feet, hang out for a little bit, relax, and then head home. Now, you can stay overnight and camp. There is overnight camping there, but it is by reservation. You have to reserve a site and fill out paperwork with the National Park Service. James didn't do that. So the morning of the 22nd of December, James texted a friend of his, say, "Hey, I'm going for a day hike to you-know-where." Right? Now, his friend did know where, because James often went to the hot springs. And so he told James to have fun. James left his home. All the investigation that has been done on somewhere around 10 o'clock in the morning. James took his Subaru Outback and he drove to Olympic National Park, in which he was an annual pass holder, and headed up the trailhead. Now, again, this particular trail is well maintained and it is paved, all right, for the most part. There are places where it crosses creeks and whatnot where obviously it's not paved. But for the most part, it is a completely maintained trail, and you can't lose it, guys. This is not one of those trails that if you kind of get turned around a little bit and you look down and you're off the trail and you don't know where you're at. It is a well-established and paved trail. You can't lose it. James, according to reports, got there at 10 in the morning and headed up the trail. Now, we fast forward a little bit because this is where things kind of go south for James, all right? On Christmas Eve, James was supposed to be at a Christmas Eve party, but he never showed up. Now, again, his family grew concerned, and who wouldn't, is that a family member is supposed to be somewhere, to show up for Christmas and doesn't. So on Christmas Day, December 25th, James's family went over to his home, in which they found his dog on the inside of the house, and obviously in distress because the dog had been inside for days without being cared for. This sent the family into a slight panic because this is totally not like James. Clearly, James hadn't never come back from Olympic National Park. And after the family called around to some of his friends and actually spoke with the friend that James had texted, they knew that James had gone to Olympic National Park. At least that was his last communication with anybody. So they notified local law enforcement that James was indeed missing on December 25th of 2014. Now, the local law enforcement had to reach out to the National Park Service, and which they did, and they informed the National Park Service that they had a missing person, James Griffin, who was most likely lost somewhere within their park, within Olympic National Park. The National Park Service then were told that he most likely was at the hot springs, and they dispatched park rangers. But one of the park rangers, who had been on duty for the last couple of days, was given a description of James's vehicle, and he remembered seeing that exact vehicle at the trailhead in the parking lot of the Hot Springs Trail. So, when they got there, James's vehicle was still there. They searched the vehicle, and inside the vehicle they found not much of anything other than a receipt that was actually on the 22nd of December, the day James had went missing or came there to go hiking. On the receipt, it said that it was around 10:20 in the morning when James had stopped at a Safeway and he had purchased Folgers instant coffee and a Tootsie Roll. I guess it was a big one. I don't know. But that's what the receipt said. So they went up the trail. They were looking for James. They searched. They called out. They did their due diligence, but there was no sign of James. At this point in time, they decided to go to cameras, look around, and see if they could find license plates of vehicles that were in the parking lot at the same time James was there. This actually did lead to something. They reached out to the people whose cars were in the parking lot the same day James was there, and they did find one couple who remembered speaking with James at the hot springs. So James had indeed arrived, gotten out of his vehicle, made the hike up the trail, and arrived at the hot springs. They said they shared some non-alcoholic drinks with James, but they were staying the night. This particular couple were spending the night, and so at about 3 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they said their goodbyes to James, and they proceeded to go back to their campground. From all of what they said, James seemed to be in good spirits, nothing out of the ordinary. He wasn't behaving strangely. He was there soaking his feet. And one of the people of the couple just said that as they were heading back to their campsite, they looked over their shoulder and they actually saw James getting up, putting his shoes back on, unrolling his pants, grabbing his backpack, which was a red and black backpack, and then heading back down the trail to his vehicle. Now, it is a slight uphill climb from the trailhead parking lot to the hot springs, and overall, it's like a 2-mile hike, so it's not a very long hike, and again, a paved, well-maintained trail. And plus, James is now going downhill to head back to his vehicle. Then the park rangers had something to go on. So they started going back down the trail. They went up the trail. They searched off the trail. And as they were doing so, about a half mile from the parking lot, off trail, there was a creek that ran by the trail. The searchers found James's backpack. Now, it had been covered with a towel, and it was leaned up against a log right next to the creek. There was a can of Coca-Cola and a cup sitting on the log, as well as a cigarette butt that was James's brand. There was a package of like mountain food. You know, it's called a mountain meal, which is like pre-fixed survival meal kind of thing that you have to heat up. But there was no oven or stove. And in fact, when they searched James's backpack, they found the fuel and the stove for heating the meal up still inside of his backpack. Also inside the backpack, they found a camera. They had the film developed on the camera, and they were all normal pictures, scenery, this, that, and the other. But the last 2 pictures on the roll, and it was actually on the day that James had gone missing, was 2 pictures of interest. It didn't really show anything, but one was of the dense, dark foliage on the other side of the creek, and then one was kind of down the creek in boulder-strewn area. Now, neither one of them had anything in it. It was just a scenic picture. But, you know, certain scenic photography, if you're taking pictures of something you find beautiful, you're trying to make it look great. These just seem like random pictures instead of, pictures that were taken to show the beauty of something. However, that's just a guess. The thing about the other side of the creek was once you crossed the creek from where James was apparently sitting to make a meal, the grade of the land became very steep. And again, this is Olympic National Park, guys, and it rains a tremendous amount in that part of the world. If you guys know anything about Twilight, the books, the movies, or anything like it, Forks, Washington is right near Port Angeles, and it is one of the most rainy locations on the planet. It rains a tremendous amount in this area of the world. And because of this, the foliage in Olympic National Park is lush and dense and green, and it's quite lovely, but it's super thick. And so the other side of this creek, it really went up an incline, a super steep incline, and became very dense and rugged very quickly. So the searchers then got other searchers involved because now they found James's backpack, but no sign of James. So they informed the family that they had found James's backpack and had them identify the items, in which the family said, yes, this belonged to James. At this point in time, the family suggested that they bring James's dog to that place and see if maybe he could find James, because the dog and James had a very loving relationship. They brought the dog. Unfortunately, it didn't amount to anything. The dog didn't go to James or lead them to James, so that was kind of a bust. But the park rangers then brought in 3 separate canine units of their own to look for James. And over the course of the next couple of weeks, that's exactly what they did. They had search teams out, they had canine units going, and it led to absolutely nothing. Eventually, inclement weather came in. Again, it rains a lot in that area, and it also, because of this, creates very dense fog at times, and it really inhibited search efforts. So the search was scaled down after a few weeks of looking for James with no sign of him. At this point in time, the National Park Service put 3 search teams, 2 people each, and canine units. Each team had a canine unit looking for James. But that was it. So 6 people were looking for this guy now. However, on January 25th, almost a little over a month, 30 days after James had gone missing, one of the search teams and their canine unit was heading uphill on the other side of the creek, which was super steep. Now remember, James had an injured foot, so much so that James wasn't working and he was on disability. So nobody really thought that James would have headed up this steep incline into rugged terrain and dense foliage. It just didn't make any sense. But they decided, you know what, we'll try it. The dogs never picked up on a scent, but about 1,000 feet up the hillside, they found a Tootsie Roll wrapper. Now remember, according to the receipt found in James's vehicle, that he had bought a Tootsie Roll. All right. Now, 700 feet past that, at 1,700 feet past the where James's backpack was found, unfortunately, they found James Griffin's body. It was laying on the ground by a log. However, there was no signs of injuries. It didn't appear that anything traumatic had happened to James. He just was dead. He was fully clothed from all reports. However, reports did not say whether or not he was wearing shoes. A lot of these missing person cases, if the body is found, they're missing clothing in some capacity. But at this one, it appears that James was fully clothed. He had a coat on, his shirt, his pants, the whole shebang. They brought James's body down, and again, unfortunately, him being deceased and telling the family must have been heartbreaking, but at least they had some closure. But this is not where this ends, guys. This is actually where the mystery kind of begins, at least for me it does, is that the coroner did an autopsy on James, and he did find absolutely no cause of death for James other than listing it as accidental and James dying of hypothermia. Now, this doesn't make any sense to me, guys. James had a coat on. James was sitting by, apparently James was a half a mile away from his car. So if James was so cold that he was becoming hypothermic, why would he stop to go sit by a creek? And more importantly, James apparently was in the process of fixing himself a meal by this creek, but then decided to cross the creek and then head 1,700 feet up a steep incline with an injured foot that has him on disability to die by a log. None of this makes sense. I'll tell you what else doesn't make sense. They had canine units there sniffing that whole area, and none of them ever picked up James's scent that led them uphill. It was just happenstance that they decided, hey, we should look uphill, and they did. And it wasn't until they got on top of James that the dog keyed in that there was even a body there, and James was pretty noticeable laying by the log once you're on top of him. So why couldn't the dogs pick up James's scent? Also super strange. What also baffles me is that they found a Tootsie Roll wrapper 1,000 feet away from where James was fixing a meal. So if a man is sitting down, he's going to fix himself a meal, why then cross the creek, start heading uphill, and decide just to eat a Tootsie Roll? I don't know. Or did James even eat the Tootsie Roll? Did something or somebody else eat the Tootsie Roll? It's a very valid question. The coroner also listed something in his report that I find either to be a giant mistake or ultimately the weirdest part of this whole case. is that the coroner listed James's time of death, according to the state of his body, as January 25th, the day he was found. Now, James went missing 30 days prior to this, guys. By this point in time, being left out in the elements, some form of decomposition should have started to occur. But that wasn't the case. And again, toxicology reports stated that he had no alcohol or drugs in his system. So, what happened? You know, where was James? I mean, they did search that area, dogs and everything else, and nothing was found of James. So it's really odd to me that a man on disability decided a half a mile away from his car to stop and fix a meal. And then what interrupted James from doing that? Because I get leaving the trail to sit down on a log next to a peaceful and serene creek to kind of take in the ambiance of Olympic National Park, because it is a beautiful place. But then what disturbed James enough to where a man on disability decided to cross a creek and then head 1,700 feet in rugged terrain and dense foliage uphill to die of hypothermia by a log, apparently 30 days later? I have no idea. This case blows my mind. I would love to hear what you guys have to say about it. It's just beyond me. And nothing has ever been stated otherwise. I mean, again, James's official records list him as an accidental death by hypothermia, which, you know, according to that means that James walked off into Olympic National Park somehow, off a well-maintained paved trail, ate a Tootsie Roll, and then climbed 700 more feet and died 30 days after he went missing. Makes no sense, guys. But I would love to hear what you guys have to say about it. I always enjoy it, so please leave me something in the comment section below, because I you know, my theories end. I'm really perplexed by this one. I have no real theories, unless James was somehow forced uphill by something or somebody else. But then, you know, why is he listed? Why is his body in such good shape? I mean, where was James for 30 days if he was missing for 30 days to die of hypothermia and there's no sign of trauma or any other thing that could have killed James? So I would love to hear it. So again, leave me something in the comment section below. If you are new to the channel, you've been here this long, I surely hope you'll subscribe. I was looking at my analytics the other day, and 80% of you guys that watch the channel and these videos are not subscribed. And that makes me sad. So help me turn my frown upside down and smash in that subscribe button. And if you did enjoy this video, turn the like button blue for me. Give it a thumbs up. It lets me know you're enjoying the content, and it helps me out, and I greatly appreciate it. And last but not least, if you are new to the channel and you are subscribing, guys, hit the bell and get the notifications. Because again, I am going to school at night, and I'm working during the day. I'm pulling 80-hour weeks, so I am not uploading on the regular right now. But I am going to be, because I graduate in June. Hooray, huzzah! And guess what, guys? After June, when I graduate and I reach that finish line, I'll get back to uploading at least one video a week. So hit the bell, get the notification so you don't miss out on the next strange, baffling, mysterious case that I bring here to Storytelling Imperfectly. But that is it for Patrick today, guys. Thank you so much for being here one last time, and I will see you guys in the next video.